Tough Call Mediation is brought to you by Ehler Mediation and Legal Services, serving your mediation and legal service needs in Ontario, New York, and throughout North America. You can reach us at info@ehlerservices.com or go to our website at ehlerservices.com. That's EHLER services.com.
Welcome everyone to Tough Call, a mediation podcast. My name is CT Ehler, and with me, my lovely co-host, Dale Sheldon.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I see you're getting lots of attention and affection from my dog.
Yeah, Jayla's here. Little Jayla.
Sometimes I think she's looking at me right now like, see? Someone else is paying attention to me. Someone else loves me. Are you jealous, Mommy? It's like, no, I'm not jealous at all.
I think she smells my cats, too.
I know. Yeah. I would love for you to bring over your cat. I miss having cats. I do. I'm horribly allergic to them.
I was going to say, I thought you were allergic for some reason.
I am. But I love them. And I've had them my whole life.
Oh.
Yeah. And when I was living overseas, I was part of a volunteer association where I actually took over part of the palliative care for end-of-life dog for animal shelter that was run in part by a university that had a large veterinary program. But they had this one small, they called it the cat house. And because I loved cats, I was like, I'm going to go help one day and volunteer. Because volunteers was more popular with dogs than with cats. And so it was hard to find volunteers for cats. I was like, well, I'll do it. And I remember armed with the food to go in one day, open the door, and instantly my eyes start watering because there are so many cats in there.
Many, yeah.
And I'm trying, and it's just, it was a fairly large structure, at least from my memory, my mind's eye, that it was decent. They weren't all like crowded together. Mm-hmm. And there were certain places where they could sit and do things. But I just remember getting out and just like, I actually had an asthma attack because that's how, and there's a cat shelter in Gananoque where we got our last cat, Gordy. And I had thought maybe we will volunteer by going, and they had so many cats. So when I went in, instant, like, eyes watering, skin itchy, I'm having breathing difficulties. You do get used to your own cat, so that's part of it. But pretty much any time I've been in a home that's had more than 3 cats, especially, or a cat that has a significant amount of dander, especially when they get older, cats with sometimes ones that have skin conditions, and there's a lot of shedding. Oof. Brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, she sheds a lot too. So I'm sure my allergies will be significantly better if she moves in with you. Look at that. Look, she's like, pet me more.
Yeah.
She will never tire. I mean, like we could try. Let's see. Keep petting her. See if she gets bored first. She's like, no, keep petting me. All right. Shall we get into this, though?
Yeah.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about not really recent. I had mentioned it in our trailer intro podcast pilot about the Riot Games, the $100 million payout, talking about workplace bullying, harassment, and sexual harassment in the workplace. And I had just heard of that through the news. I didn't realize that it was actually also around the time of that mass Google walkout that happened in 2018, where there were, I have it in my notes a little further down, where, there it is. 20,000 people participated in the 2018 walkout.
20,000 people.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. I remember it breaking. I mean, this is pre-COVID, so some of my history is shaky immediately preceding the pandemic, but I do remember it being a really huge deal, and I had no idea it was that scale.
I didn't either.
Yeah. And there was a recent decision of Ilka Rowe. She was a Google exec who won $1.15 million in court. And that was following that 2018 mass walkout. And when I was doing the research, because there was an article that came out about Riot Games harassment in the workplace in 2018. So it all seems to have been a time when people must have been getting together. People must have been organizing and talking about it and trying to share this experience of workplace harassment, but particularly sexual harassment and bullying towards women in like the tech industry stuff. And what's interesting is I found that no one really talks about the game development company cases and the Google case. Together. I haven't found it yet. I mean, maybe a listener will be like, no, specifically at this time. Please let me know. But I do remember watching a lot of like content about it and various news sources discussing this. And yet it was only in May of 2023 that $100 million payout minus $20 million that goes to the lawyers, because it was a mass lawsuit. And yet hot on the tails of Riot Games is the Activision Blizzard. It's a payout of $35 million in a settlement.
Wow.
And there were a lot of buzz about these two companies, but you almost see it as a separate thing with Google. But when you realize, oh, this all starts in 2018, women in the tech industry were saying enough is enough. And I wonder how much it has changed, because there's a couple of things here that I found really, really interesting. For example, there was like a lot of harassment and certain types of discrimination in the workplace, different types of lawsuits. And I actually don't know the number, because there was a mention to a number of lawsuits out there. And so I wonder if it's like, if maybe Google, this article with gaming development, and it just blew the lid off. And there may be a lot of ones that just aren't getting the same recognition. And I'm going to put a lot of the articles and research that I did, I'm going to put in the show notes. Okay. But there's a lot to go through. And a lot of gamers might know who, these companies are. Like, for example, Riot Games, they do League of Legends.
Yeah, I've heard of Riot Games for sure.
I actually have never heard of League of Legends and Riot Games.
I've never played League of Legends. I mean, I'm not a huge gamer to begin with, but I play some games here and there.
Yeah.
Not familiar with that particular one, but I have heard of the company, at least.
Right, but Activision Blizzard I know of.
Yeah, Activision is an old
because that's Call of Duty, World of Warcraft. I mean, they're sort of the big.
And they've been around for a long time.
Oh yeah, I know people who worked for them and whatnot, but I don't know anything about League of Legends. But some facts about them: 2016, they had 100 million monthly users.
Wow.
Yeah. Today they have 117 million monthly users.
That's crazy.
And in 2015, they made
money they are bringing in.
Oh, yeah. In 2015, $1.6 billion in revenue. 2022, they reported $1.8 billion.
Wow.
So, yeah, this made a big splash, but 100 million, when you look at how much they're generating annually, that wasn't much, really.
Yeah.
It's like they could afford to pay
way more. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh.
I wonder what they do with all that money. I mean, how many employees do they?
I actually have that. They have, I've put it here somewhere. They have 2,500 employees over 22 offices.
I feel like every single one of those employees should be just dripping in money.
Well, that would be really nice. It would be nice to know like how much they are.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing
the
is,
vast majority of them probably make less than $100,000 a year.
Maybe. It skews very white male. It's dominant, right?
I'm sure it does, yeah.
Some of the other things, just to bring up Activision Blizzard, they earned $2.7 billion in 2022 in their third quarter.
In their third quarter?
Yeah. That's one of the only ones that I could find. And I was like, 2.7 billion?
In 3 months.
Yeah. So 35 million? That was like, here you go. No problem. But they had similar claims of lacking adequate processes for reviewing workplace harassment, harm. There's a list of things that a particular article, the particular one that seemed to blow the lid off the gaming culture was a 2018 Kotaku article by Cecilia D'Anastasio. I hope I'm saying that right. So, it really was the discussion about toxic masculinity and that this was a bra culture. There's a lot of references in the very lengthy article, very thorough article discussing how stifling the bra culture was, but not just for women. They actually talked about how it was stifling for men as well. It was just more of a side note, and I would have liked to maybe had her talk. But obviously she's focusing on the specific targeted workplace harassment, the sexual harassment too. There are some pretty shocking statements that were made in the article. One of the ones right at the beginning, I'm going to read straight from it. You had an understanding of what they were facing. So hiring a woman into leadership position proved impossible for Lacey, she said, and she left the company in part because of the sexism she personally experienced. She said her direct manager would ask her if it was hard working at Riot being so cute. Sometimes, she said, he'd imply that her position was a direct result of her appearance. Every few months, she said, a male boss of hers would comment in public in meetings about how her kids and husband must really miss her while she was at work.
Crazy.
But she conducts an experiment one day where in one of those, game shooting idea, meetings, she floated an idea. It dies. And because she was experiencing so much, bullying, harassment, she convinced a male coworker to pitch the exact same idea the next week.
Different name or something. So maybe they didn't.
No, the exact same idea.
Okay.
Floats it. He gets touted. Oh, it was amazing. That was the best idea ever. Oh, we're totally going. And so he was made aware of how that happened. Yeah.
I mean, and you mentioned a moment ago that, it's not just women, even men feel that. I know I would. And part of it, I think it's just being gay. I know when I'm in a male-dominated area, I feel very uncomfortable. I don't know why it is. Well, when it's all heterosexual, especially.
Right.
There's just this.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
And it can really depend. It's
just weird how they this kind of, I don't know, this kind of
I think we could say 9 times out of 10, it tends to skew into that weird hierarchy. Who's the alpha male of the group?
Yeah.
And then if that alpha male, that appointed alpha male is not necessarily, benevolent or magnanimous or cooperative or team oriented or inspiring.
And they almost never are.
Right? They tend to be more about domination and force and ridicule. right? And I find that
I wouldn't say always ridicule specifically, but definitely dominate. I mean, sometimes it can be from a raw team, but it's still about this strength and masculinity, and it's still very much dominating over the group. Yeah.
Well, I haven't worked in overwhelmingly male workplaces, except in a couple of instances.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of male friends at different times in my life. And I always knew I was sort of the girl next door, one of the dudes, you know, like I could feel very, very comfortable hanging out with just guys until it, like, especially in the 90s, remember how it became very vogue to call everything as gay being a bad thing.
As a bad thing, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. I remember way too well.
And it was such a shaming.
It was terrible.
Type of thing that people would say.
Still very common.
Yeah, but just remember how it was pervasive, even in like SNL would have. I remember some of my friends being like, "Oh, I love SNL." I was like, "Oh, I haven't watched that in a long time. It's really good." "Oh yeah, it's so good." And I remember there was a party. This was like late 90s, early aughts maybe. And we're at this party. There's a whole group of people. And they have this massive television screen, and they decide to have SNL, which is a bit weird at a party. Let's all get together. And I think that's why it sticks out.
We did that in the 90s, though. I did that a few times myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. For me, it was weird.
I think because it was a pop culture reference, if all the teens got together and we kind of watched it together, it was a unifying kind of thing.
Well, but I was adulting back then. Like that was like, if I'm thinking late 90s, early aughts.
Late 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking more like 94,
well into
95.
My 20s. No.
When I was in high school still. So you're only a couple of years older than me.
I know. but so I'm at this party and this is playing, but it was almost all gay bashing jokes.
Yeah.
And I just remember watching it and feeling increasingly uncomfortable and watching how so many other people in the room were laughing their heads off. And I'm like, I'm feeling really uncomfortable right now. And they were my friends, but suddenly they didn't feel like my friends. And it's not like, oh, I suddenly felt like I was in danger, but I definitely felt like I was excluded because I'm queer. Like many of them knew that at that time I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship with a girl. So it was just very I remember we didn't have that pointing out, call out culture that we have today. If you're uncomfortable, if you felt brave enough to be like, yeah, that's not funny, is how I would start to say. Like, just, I wouldn't be like, that's not funny. It was just more, yeah, that's not really funny, because I wasn't laughing either. I'm like, oh, you can't take a joke. Oh, you're so sensitive.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, it's just not funny. I'm feeling really ridiculed. And that's sort of the thing that they were talking about, is this bra culture was definitely about putting people down, about competing, about talking over each other, but getting louder and louder and louder of like, you're not to have an idea. Sit down, woman. And they knew it. And they actually bring up in the article, there's a really interesting quote. So not only women, but men, they reported that the promise that Riot Game offered seamless, fair, and meritocratic comp review cycles was baseless. And then here's the direct quote. People say merit with an undercurrent of sarcasm. Everyone secretly knows that is not the case. Just knew it wasn't about merit. It was about specifically, and they had very unfair hiring practices, and women were crowded out. They were turned down, they were derided if they turned down duties out of their job that didn't fit their job description, like secretarial work. There was also workers who were deemed to not fit in would then be dubbed as cultural mismatches and would be pressured to receive 10% of their salary if they could leave.
Wow.
Yeah. You're not fitting in. Here, we can give you a little bit of your salary if you just go now.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Right? It's not necessarily illegal because they're paying them to leave. It's probably just legal enough.
Yeah.
Right? And I find those types of things, I wanted to sort of dive into this whole toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, but I think that's reserved maybe for a future episode.
Okay. Yeah.
Just because workplace harassment itself does not have to get to a point where someone needs to stand up and sue a company. And more often than not, the more successful ones are when it's class actions. Mm-hmm. Because people get mitigated out of work for all sorts of different reasons. And it's really interesting to watch how one lone person can be gaslit so easily. And people who are afraid of their jobs are willing to be, I don't want to get involved. It has nothing to do with me. It's not going to affect me. And I've been in situations where I was bullied at work. Actually, it was a woman who was bullying me. That was actually my thing was never really been about men. It's always been about women, but that's yet another podcast episode. But I really found it interesting when one particular situation was occurring is I'm going through it. I'm going through the motions of this manager just making my life utter hell day in, day out. And going in one day and one of my coworkers going, oh yeah, this happened to me next year. It's okay. Just ride it out. Next year it'll be better. And I foolishly did, which was so dumb. Like looking back on it now, I was like, why didn't I just pack up and go? That was dumb. And I waited until the next year. Didn't get any better. So yeah, but it would be better if HR management departments had better opportunities to work with outside private mediation, because I feel like mediation is not as effective when it's the HR manager.
Oh, completely.
Right?
Yeah.
They're expected to mediate, but they have skin in the game. They're being paid by the employers.
Exactly.
They're supposed to implement these rules. They're supposed to enforce these policies. But how can they when...
They still have to answer to the big boss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't want to bite the hand that feeds them.
Exactly. Especially
if it is potentially being perpetrated by the executives and the owners.
Yeah.
Right? If not perpetrated, it's a permissible situation. They're turning a blind eye. They don't really care. I think we've all had those, like even in small businesses, sort of laissez-faire owners. It's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
They don't want to watch. They don't want to see it.
Yeah.
They purposely put on blinders. Yeah.
Yeah. So then that leaves it open for people who can create more toxic workplace environments. So bringing in outside mediation to address it early, I think, is a better way to go, as long as it makes sense. What's that sound?
It's your
Is
phone.
this me?
Pastries filled with egg, cheese, and premium meats.
What the hell? Is this my app? Hold on. Let me see what happens. Is it me?
Yeah.
What? I hadn't even opened I was about to move over to something. Where did that go? Okay. Tyrai, just take all that part out. So where were we? What was I about to say?
I don't know where you were going with that, but Well, I mean, I was going to say that just to bring into a little pop culture thing to exactly what you're talking about. Have you ever seen, there was a very popular series in the US, I don't know if it went to Canada or not, called The Fosters, which I think I've told you about before, maybe.
Yeah, I think you've told me about it, but I
Really
don't.
good show.
Yeah.
But it was about a lesbian couple. They adopt all these foster kids. They have one biological son, and they have 4 foster children.
Okay.
Fantastic series. It had a spin-off then called Good Trouble, where 2 of the 2 foster daughters moved from LA to I guess it's San Francisco. No. Oh no, they moved from San Diego to LA.
Okay.
And the one daughter, Mariana, she's brilliant mind, and she is hired in tech. Like her tech is her thing.
Oh, okay.
And they go through and the first season of
when was that?
Good Trouble was in 2019. So I'm like, I feel like it's maybe they wrote this based on some of what you're talking about. Exactly.
Probably. It makes sense. It's good fodder.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because her immediate supervisor and her little team, except for one guy, are very misogynist, ridiculously misogynist. They put her in a desk on the side of the room. She's only given even though she's 10 times smarter than any of them.
Right.
She's given this menial work to do. And the owner of the company is just oblivious to everything.
Right.
Well, not that this is bad or good or an excuse, but he is on the spectrum as well.
Okay.
But
he's
very focused.
Yeah. On this.
And as long as the things are coming in on time and they're working, that is what he's focused on. He just doesn't get it. He doesn't see it until she brings it to his attention. And he still has to, it takes a lot for him to understand it, but then he does fix it, or he tries to fix, not very well, but he tries to fix it. He ends up dating Mariana then. No. So there's issues.
I don't know how that really is a good idea.
There are issues, but it's interesting how they do tap into that story and explore it.
Well, I mean, I knew a Canadian gaming company, that was, started by someone I went to high school with, and someone I knew also in high school worked for him, and I got to see them in the early days, and then they blew up really huge for a few years, but they got too big too fast.
Yeah.
And I only knew really well the male workers who worked for the company. But the owner, the founder, I don't think he was autistic, but I had a huge crush on him in high school. Huge crush on him. And he was like just this skinny, geeky boy with this great smile. And every time he smiled at me, I was like, oh, hi. But then when he owned this company, he turned into this really big muscle guy. He would go and he would code, and then he would go and work out. It was just like, oh, you're not that attractive anymore. Go back to being a geek boy. But the thing is both of my friends who left the company, or when the company crashed and burned, they had talked about how there was a bra culture and how much they were men, they were cis heterosexual men. They did not feel comfortable there. They did not like how it was being directed. Yeah. It was very domineering. You do what I say. And one worked in the art department, one worked in music and coding, and both were very, well, you're not the coders, the developers, the real brains of the operation. You're just art. It's like, art's pretty important. That's what sells games.
Yeah.
You can have a really great fast, if it's a racing game, really great fast cars, but if they don't look good, it's not selling. And I think they just didn't get that. And because the founder was more of, I just want to go to the gym and code, he sort of allowed the business to be run by people who just got very large egos very fast. And I think people forget often, they like to make it such a gender divide as if there's only two genders, right?
Yeah.
As if we only fall into one or two categories and that's it. But that like a certain amount of workplace toxicity that doesn't have mediation, coming in early, seeing if there are any issues, addressing it, trying to implement interim agreements, trying to help people recognize, especially those people who want to see the business succeed and make those, billion-dollar revenues to happen. And if you want to grow to that level, how about you start implementing things that make people just so excited to be there? I mean, we could argue since I've talked about these revenues and that they're, they've paid, but have they really changed? I mean, there may be more pushback. COVID really changed a lot of things. My understanding is there's a lot more remote work. So that could have changed the culture too. Who knows what it's like in 2024, the work environment, But there are workplace mediation that talks specifically about these types of things, and all of them talk about early intervention is the way to go. Nip it in the bud before it gets even worse, before you watch talent walk out that door.
Yeah.
And I think that's the unfortunate thing. Okay, yeah, your game is really great. Your tech is really great. Can it be better? Quite possibly. Who are those people making it better? Have you really hired the people and who feel valued enough to want to participate and create? Because it's a collaborative effort. It's like making a movie or a play. People come together, and it's not just the director who's making a play or a film happen.
Yeah.
I love how sometimes you get those directors or producers who are like, yes, it was all me. I'm so amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell. I mean, there are so many games that I don't even bother with because the art is terrible. Even if it's simplistic, it needs to be crisp. And yeah, right. So yeah, it is. It's absolutely a group effort.
Yeah.
It's funny how many things that you're saying are so close to what is it? Good Trouble, that show. So many things are similar. Like, even though they kind of worked out those things, later on, there were a group of women from that company that walked out and they all sued him later on. Just like what you were talking about.
Right.
And it's interesting to see how that played out. Now, I think, if I remember correctly, I believe they settled out of court, but it included a list of stipulations, like he needed to make these changes in the company, and I'm curious if any of that sort of thing happened with these companies.
Yes, there are some agreements that that have happened. Like the California Civil Rights posted, confirm submission. It wants me to get back into it. Say it's like civil rights. We want to make sure, but that's how I had a chance to learn that it didn't, this wasn't actually fully paid out until May 16th, 2023.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is there are a lot of people like, okay, we want a settlement, but then there could be, a time for people, maybe people have taken it for appeal or judicial review or whatnot. They're fighting against it. But even let's say there was no appeal or judicial review, it can take time to implement and work out the finer points of the details.
And keep in mind, it took, 5 years, right? In the meantime, the women who stood up and had the bravery to create that lawsuit, they could, in the meantime, be blackballed in the industry.
Yes.
Because no one else wants to hire someone who's going to sue them.
Yep. That, and also... when you leave before it gets quote unquote really bad, it's already been bad enough to make you want to leave.
Yeah.
And I've been in that situation where you're trying to apply for another job and they're like, well, why do you want to leave? And you're really uncomfortable. You don't want to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
You want to, I unfortunately have a tendency to be a little too honest. And then I can see it's like, well, if you're the same way, I'm probably not going to get hired. But the truth of the matter is when you're stuck trying to find a new job because you're miserable where you are.
Yeah.
How do you say that?
Yeah.
I say, I'm just miserable there. They're not valuing me. I could be doing so much more. I have so much to offer, and they're just passing me by, and I want an opportunity to grow. I mean, maybe people should write that down and then try it and see if they're successful actually being that kind of honest. I mean, there are rare like bosses and companies out there that would love someone who says, I really want to contribute something. You know, someone who's been in management positions at times too. It's like someone who's really engaged. I love those people. It's like, great, awesome. Not someone who's just going to come, clock in, complain the whole time, and then clock out.
Yeah.
But some people like them. Some managers love those types of people.
I mean, I suppose it depends on the job, but
yeah.
if it's data entry, maybe you want that kind of person. Somebody who's just going to come in, do their work, get it done on time, and leave and kind of be quiet about it.
Yeah, maybe.
But
I don't know.
There's so few positions where that's the case.
Yeah. Well, there's so many people who hate their jobs and they come in and they're super miserable.
Yeah.
They talk.
Why are you here?
Yeah. When I was a former healthcare worker, that's what people used to complain to. That was more often than not, they weren't complaining about their families. They weren't complaining about the state of the world. They're complaining about their jobs and how toxic it was in their workplace.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that sort of inspired me to come back into the law was I would feel so helpless. I'm like, okay, well, I hope you feel better now that we sat here and we've helped you with feeling better in your body. But good luck with going to work tomorrow to face that group of people who hate each other, hate you, stifle creativity, stifle any attempt at solving the problem.
Yeah. I couldn't.
It's just too much. But you asked. So Civil Rights Department, State of California, they had this release. It was the settlement is the largest agreement of its kind in California history and resolves allegation related to systemic sex discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. Okay, so it's quite extensive, and it's violations against approximately 1,600 women. Wow. Employees, but including contract workers. Okay. And there was a statement later on saying by CRD Director Kevin Kish, today's decision is a critical step forward for healing and the rights of all Californians. My office is proud of the cross-agency collaboration that led this consent decree and will put in place important structural changes at Riot Games to ensure that women workers won't suffer similar harms in the future. And it goes into certain things. One of the things that they're expected to do is create a $6 million cash reserve for each year of the 3-year term of the consent decree, totaling $18 million to make pay adjustments and to fund diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Okay. Make available 40 full-time positions in engineer, quality assurance, or art design roles to qualified class members who worked as temporary contractors in a competitive process. That's huge.
Yeah. No, keep in mind, in the tech industry, a huge percentage are contract workers.
Yes.
Huge
and
percentage.
temporary. They're just temporary.
But temporary could be 3 years.
Yeah.
It's a weird
Where
thing.
they're just weirdly renewing the contract.
They just continually renew the contract over and over and over again.
Hire and pay for an independent third-party expert to conduct a gender equity analysis of employee pay, job assignments, and promotions each year for 3 years. An independent third party. That is part of the recommendation.
Right.
So it is like, hey, you guys should consider hiring a mediation like team or a mediator someone who has the skill set to come in and make these assessments, and maybe someone who has a background in so social services or whatnot, someone who's worked with workplace harassment, violence, that type of thing. Yeah. There's a lot of things. Oh, what I was really gearing up towards before we kind of went off was no. There's actually a nonprofit. It's called Project When. Workplace Harassment Ends Now. So it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded by Diane Stegmeyer, author of The Critical Influence Approach to Effective Work Environments. The organization focuses its research and implementable solutions on all areas of workplace harassment to include sexual, physical harassment, quid pro quo harassment, microaggression, bullying, job shaming, verbal threats, derogatory comments, discriminating or exclusionary behavior, and other forms of offensive conduct. They part of what they do is encourage workplaces to bring them in to help develop programs, to help root it out for themselves, empowering the companies to figure out how they can make their work culture better. And I really like that. I think that's
great.
Important to not make it more of a prescriptive directive thing, but more like, hey, you've got a problem. How are you going to solve it? What are you going to do about this so that your company can continue to flourish?
Yeah. Assuming, of course, that the upper management and owners of that company are willing to actually do it properly.
True.
And not just do the program to make it look good and then continue to. But a lot of companies, I think, would probably be sincere and actually do it.
I think
properly.
It depends. I mean, obviously, my one anecdotal experience is knowing personally how a company with a toxic work culture came to an end.
Right,
it was pretty much because of those executives with their egos.
Yeah.
Making bad decisions, which is why the company failed. I mean, the founder was brilliant, still is brilliant, hired great talent initially, but then whoever he let take the reins of actually managing the company, their egos just went too far with it. And I mean, not just the two people that I knew, but through them, I knew some of the others who worked with them. And at the time when I was making a discussion, I was hanging out with several of them. They were all like, yep. They identified very specific people who had made the company a failure because of how toxic they had become. And that's the thing is, I think that's a lesson that a lot of companies really need to take note. It's like, okay, yeah, you're making billion-dollar profits or multi-million, or you're doing super well and you're growing fast. But why not take the time now to see where there's room for improvement, to see what could be potentially quashing talent or getting people unhappy? There's nothing worse than walking into a room and asking how everyone's doing and seeing plastic smiles. I mean, I think sometimes I wonder, it's like, don't you know, like deep down, don't you know people are being sycophants and faking it for you? Because if not, then pull your head out of the clouds.
Or maybe they don't care.
Maybe they don't care.
Maybe they want to be oblivious to it because it makes them feel good. I don't know. Some people are genuinely oblivious to the world around them. I don't entirely understand it, but
I'm sure there are a lot of listeners out there. I mean, feel free to send in some of your disaster workplace scenarios or some bad jobs that you've been in, because there's been, like, I've had really bad jobs in the past. I'm sure you've had a few.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What was your top worst job?
I mean, what's weird is even when I was very young, somehow I always got thrown into supervisory positions fairly quickly.
They're like you.
Way before I was ready. Way before I was ready. My very first job like real job. I mean, I've been working in ways in theater since I was 6 years old, but
Okay, so you were 7, you were appointed CEO of a film company.
But my first real job was at a Barnes & Noble.
When you were 7?
When I was 20. When I was 20. And it was just a bookseller, you know.
Okay.
And pretty quickly I was promoted to lead bargain book. So I would have the bargain area.
Right.
And then I saw that we had this music department in the back that was completely ignored. People called it the cave because no one wanted to work back there. Literally dirt and like cobweb. It was really bad. And I found out there was supposed to be a manager running it.
Right.
And that we hadn't had for years for some reason. And I was like, why do we not have, or a supervisor, I mean,
Right.
like, why do we not have a supervisor back there? And like, we don't know, we just never did it. I was like, oh, well, okay, can I do it then? And they gave me like the training stuff to be a supervisor.
Learn it on your own. Go be a supervisor.
Seriously.
Did
yes.
you get paid
There were
for
these
it?
not during that initial part, but when I finally
Right.
became a supervisor, yes, I got a supervisor pay.
And suddenly you're making $80 million.
And yeah, that would be nice.
You would have never left
This
that
was
job
back before
then, right?
some laws had changed, but yeah, this was in '98.
Right.
It was fairly early-ish. Yeah. Anyway, I went through all that. I remember they took me as soon as I got the position. They sent me to a supervisor like retreat training thing in Tempe, Arizona, and they gave me a DVD to Sixth Sense. I think it was. Yeah, I think it was my very first DVD ever in 1998. Anyway, so that was like my first job. Why was I talking about all that?
Bad job.
Bad job. That job was good, but I left that one. A headhunter came to that job and offered me a position as an executive assistant, some bullshit title,
Right.
for a party city in Valencia, California. Worst job I have ever had in my entire life.
You were there for 2 days.
No, I was there for, I think, 8 months.
Wow.
I was there on 9/11. I remember that.
Okay.
And they wanted us to work
Of course.
that day and the next day. And I was
Yes.
like, I'm not coming in. Nobody's
How dare you.
Nobody's going to Party City the day after on September 12th, 2001. I'm closing the doors.
Let's have a post 9/11 party. Yeah, where should we go?
Yeah.
Party City.
No, what actually their excuse for it was? They said, but we'll sell lots of red, white, and blue balloons and little American flags.
Wow.
And I probably weren't wrong, but not enough to justify keeping the store open, as far as I was concerned.
Watch, some poor
But
little child was having their birthday and the parent needed to go.
My aunt's birthday on September 11th. So actually, yeah. What's her birthday?
No. It was September 12th. You didn't want to go.
It was September
into
12th.
work.
I didn't want to go in.
But it was like
I was already off on September 11th.
Yeah, someone was planning the party for that night and had to run in, and the store was closed. You're terrible.
No one's going to have a party. My aunt didn't have a party that evening. Nobody had a party for that week. Nobody did.
A 6-year-old's party, though?
They don't know. Have it a week later. They don't know the difference. I don't know. A 6-year-old. Maybe a 10-year-old might know. The 6-year-old's not going to know. Anyway, he was terrible. The district manager of that company, who I have not worked for a while, so I feel okay talking about it, he was misogynist, racist, terrible man. God. Could not stand this man. Yeah, anyway, I left after 8 months. And there was a huge class action lawsuit against them that I was part of. Because what they would do is they would hire people to be like an executive assistant manager, whatever bullshit title. You would have your staff. You'd be given a limited number of hours to give to the staff to do work. But every month, especially during the holidays, you had to completely restock the entire store. It was impossible to do. So all of the management staff who don't get paid overtime because we're on salaries, then we ended up working 80, 90 hours a week.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So that's why we went, and there was a class action lawsuit, which we won, and I bought my first computer from what I got back from that. Worst
and
company
the laws
ever.
got changed.
And the laws got changed.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. There's
at least
a big
with that company.
expose with like the Dollar General and Dollar Tree. You know, there's all these people posting because even Dollar Trees and Dollar Generals around here.
Yeah, there's some around here. Yeah.
There's like one person working. It's impossible to keep up. And they're, oh my gosh, I'll never forget going into the local Dollar General. And this poor woman is sick and is overworked. And there's nobody there to fill in for her.
No,
or help
really?
her. No.
I've never been to the ones here. I've been to some in California, but there was never only one person working. It was always a minimum of 4 or 5 people working.
Well, not this one. And then so when there was I think John Oliver did a Dollar Tree thing because someone's just shared it. I haven't had a chance to go through it, but my friend and I were chatting back and forth. I was like, oh yeah, Dollar General here. It's pretty bleak. And she's like, oh yeah, I can't stop watching all these TikToks about these empty over. It's not even, let's say fine, be as ugly as you want so people know where your store is. Fine, do that, right?
They all look exactly the same. When I drove by one here, I was like, wait, am I back in Fraser Park? Where's that? Building looked exactly the same as in California. And in Fraser Park, they tore down this really cool looking old hardware store.
That they could have been in.
That they easily could have just converted.
Yeah. No, but
it
had
must
to
look
be
exactly
brand.
the same.
Yeah. That's such a shame.
Cinder block building with a big yellow sign.
But the thing is going in there, you see all of these, just the stuff strewn. Things are packed in. It's.
It's always a mess inside.
I've been in another time and there were like 2 people working, and so things were a little bit better, but they look so harassed and frazzled and tired and overworked, and it's just like these companies make billions of dollars. Why aren't they paying their employees better, stocking the stores nicer? You know, like they could be doing so much more, but they don't care. They are definitely the vultures of tough economic times. You know, but anyway, I have an entertaining, like I have a lot of bad job stories. Like we could fill an entire episode.
I have been pretty lucky,
CT.
I must say.
Yeah.
Because that one district manager was really my only truly bad one. And then I worked for Princess Cruises in Cunard for about 5 years.
Oh, that's terrible.
They were great. I actually enjoyed working for them. Yeah.
Rough.
Free cruises. Yeah, it was good. Yeah. Then I was when I was a hotel manager, that was actually fairly good. Until the last 6 months, I found 2 bodies in the last 6 months that I was there. Not in the first 4.5 years, but in the last 6 months.
Dead bodies.
Dead bodies, yeah.
Like murdered dead bodies?
No. One was a heart attack and one I think was a suicide. Very pills. So it wasn't like gory or anything.
Still.
Extremely sad. This man was super nice. He'd been staying with us for a week. I'd had a lot of conversations with him. The night before, and I would work the overnight shift. I was the manager, but I would work the overnight shift, and then I'd let my employees do during the day, usually, or I'd do the morning as well. And I sat with him for like 2 hours, just chatting that night, and he was talking about his wife and his job and like all this stuff, but that he was having some health issues and he was kind of tired, but he really loved it at the hotel. He really didn't want to leave, and he was paying daily for some reason in cash, which was kind of weird. And then
today's the day I might stay in one extra day. Today's the day
that was exactly it. He said,
day.
I'm just going to stay one more day.
Yeah.
And I really love it here. It's so relaxing. He felt really at home. He didn't want to leave. And then the next morning, one of the housekeepers were like, Dale, we can't get into the room. The deadbolt is on. And I realized he hadn't been down to check out or pay for another day or anything. And I, as the manager, I have, the lock that unlocks his door. And I found him. And I don't know if it was an accident, because I remember sometimes he would call and ask what time it was. And I would say, well, yeah, it's at 6 o'clock. And he was like, is it 6 in the morning or 6 at night? So I think like maybe he was taking pills and lost track of time.
And he said he was not well. So
He was not well. Yeah. Now, then it turned out that he had lost his job that he was telling me about months before. He had been divorced for years.
Oh,
all of the stuff that he was telling me wasn't true.
He was just living, and
Yeah.
this was. I had a great life. Maybe it was just his like.
He wanted to feel like he had that kind of the life that he wanted for a minute. I feel like.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
Man, you're so good at bringing it down.
I mean, the story gets worse. If you want to hear all of it, I can tell you the rest.
Well, I can tell a fun job that like a bad job, funny bad job. So this is when I first got to Taiwan, and I was, applying around to be a teacher. And
By the way, listeners, she used to live in Taiwan for a long time.
For 4 years, yeah. And I live in Europe. Yeah.
Au pair in the Netherlands. Anyway, so good.
And a friend of mine who had just met had said, "Oh yeah, there's like this job. I hear it's really good. I've never been there personally, but they're looking for someone. I could give you the contact, and maybe you could see and go for an interview." And they're like, yeah. And the person who I spoke with barely spoke any English, but said, yes, come for the interview. Got dropped off, got a resume together, go in. And, I'm trying to give the resume. She goes, yes. And she's walking down the hall with me. I was like, okay, we must be going to her office or something, but we're walking down the hall. She goes, yes, just to everything I'm trying to say about like, hello, I'm looking to teach. And, oh, yes. And we stop in front of a door, and then she opens it, and inside is a kindergarten classroom. There's a whole bunch of kids sitting down in a semicircle, beady little eyes, cute as button, just staring at me. This woman literally pushes me in, closes the door, and I hear it lock behind me.
With how many kids in there? And no teacher? You're the teacher now?
There were two helper teachers, like Taiwanese helpers. And they were sitting in the back at a table, and they were just sitting and looking at me. And I just didn't know what to say. And they're like, you teach now. I'm like, what?
What am I teaching?
I'd worked already as an au pair in the Netherlands, and I'd worked in daycares and all that. And I just like kids in general. Mm-hmm. So it was like, hey, kids, how you doing? Let's sit down. And I just played it, like sang a couple of songs and whatnot. And the kids were having fun. And then I look up, and I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah, go, teach, you teach. I'm like, what is going on? And I foolishly stayed there for probably was maybe half an hour or something, easily. Like I ate some time there because I was enjoying time with kids, but I was like, what am I doing here? No one had said anything to me. So finally I was like, okay, bye class, nice to see you go. And they're getting all worried. I go to the door, and I'm standing by it, and I was like knocking. I was like, can I get out? So one of them goes, brings the key, opens it up, lets me out. They're talking in Mandarin away, and they're letting someone, and there's just this kerfuffle of things. And then the woman who met me at the door, like she comes running up to me, and she goes, you teach. And I was like, no. Yes, you teach now. No. I don't know what I'm even doing here. What am I getting paid? What are my hours? Who are these children I'm supposed to be teaching? Like, I know nothing, but you're making me teach. And I just walked out. Because I'd been dropped out, and I just arrived in Taiwan. All the street signs are in Mandarin. Like, there's no way I can figure out where I am.
And did you speak any at that point? Because you did learn later.
I did,
right?
but at that point, no. Wow, not a lick. And so,
So what were you even expected to teach? English?
Yes.
I guess.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay. Expected
But
to teach them English.
I
yeah.
just walked right out off the property and I'm texting my new friend. I was like, come get me. Come get me right now. And so she comes and she's like, oh, how was it? And I was just like, But they're calling her. She goes, oh, should I say something? I said, no. We get back to her place and I tell her the whole thing. And she's like, oh, yeah, don't go back there.
Wow.
Yeah. I have many, many, many more bad stories. Didn't get paid. Just left.
Yeah.
It's like,
well,
nope.
I mean, to be fair, you didn't do anything to get paid for it. You walked
Well,
out.
I worked for half an hour, really.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess so. Staring at a bunch of children. Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm sure there's plenty of people who could beat that story and more. I'm sure we can hear all sorts of things. And also, if you have any interest in like sharing resources and tips about, what to do to overcome workplace harassment situations, like how you've managed to creatively get out of situations or to let people know kindly, give us a shout. toughcallmediation@gmail.com. Like, rate, subscribe, and hopefully see you next time.
See you later.
Bye for now.
This podcast brought to you by Blush Productions. Our senior producer and editor is Tyrai Laughton. Tech advisor is Ken Ehler. Media by Hope Ersick. Original music by Tyrai Laughton. Email your questions to toughcallmediation@gmail.com. Like, rate, and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Check out ehlerservices.com for more information.